Hey guys, this is Darth Kilhoun. Thanks for joining me today for the next installment of my Sith Empire series. Today, we will be covering the most important part of any science fiction military, the Navy. As with both the Army and Air Force, I am throwing most of the Star Wars universe in universal logic out because I want freedom with my Imperial Navy, as most of the time their Navy strategies are very flawed and they can't get much consistency in the Star Wars universe. Both Legends and canon never can concretely determine the power of weapons, weapon range, etc., and various other aspects that come into play in naval combat in the Star Wars universe. I would also like to thank the Anti-Trucker channel for his Star Trek vs. Star Wars series, as he complained about the range and effectiveness of Star Wars vs. Star Trek weaponry. Now, I am a deep Star Wars fan, and I will not blame Anti-Trucker for not knowing Star Wars at huge lengths as I do, is just as he is just a movie watcher, avoiding the deep lore of the Star Wars universe. Paraphrasing what Anti-Trekker said in his video, link will be in the description below, he compared the Star Trek weapons can hit a target at 90,000 kilometers, that's a 1 meter wide target. Then he compared it to Star Wars weapons and weapons from Episode 4 and 8, and the whole thermal exhaust port and ships are running out of fuel range plotline, which I have to say is that those were honestly just screenwriters pulling a plot out of their asses to build tension in the story. Not to say you're wrong, that is an accurate representation of Star Wars weapons, but there are tons of other sources in the universe that make it look like Star Wars weapons have far better range overall. For example, one space battle comes to mind instantly, the Battle of Christophsis from the Star Wars The Old Republic episode Cat and Mouse, where it opens up on a naval battle over the planet Christophsis, where the Republic and CIS navies are waging a small-scale battle for dominance of space. The Republic open up near the Christophsis moon, where they are trading salvos with the CIS fleet orbiting the planet. Why do I mention this? Well, I don't know the exact distance. I googled the distance between Earth and the moon Luna, and it is, well, 356,000 kilometers away. So assuming that's roughly the same distance, we can guess that, well, those fleets are firing at about 300,000 kilometers distance from one another, give or take some. That's more than 3 times the distance as the Enterprise from Star Trek can fire in the original series, as it is to be believed. Admittingly, Star Wars isn't as accurate with their shots, but I diverge too far. Now, how does this relate to my Imperial Navy, though? I was just ranting about the difference in Star Wars and Star Trek. Well, it's because I prefer accuracy mixed with overwhelming firepower within my fleet. This video, I intend to design a Navy around those principles without truly breaking the Star Wars universe. Admittingly, though, I won't completely overhaul the Navy as I did the Army and Starfighter Corps. Instead, this will stay fairly close to the average you see in the Star Wars universe. The Imperial Navy, the tip of the spear to strike against the Republic dogs and the genocidal Jedi wolves. It has both led the offensive against the swine of the galaxy and defend themselves against the vile hordes of the galaxy, who dare stand against the righteous might of the Sith Order. For centuries, the warships of the Sith Empire have struck both fear and comfort to the citizens of the galaxy with their grand displays of might. The great Sith Navy of any Sith Empire would be the Imperial Navy from the Star Wars MMORPG. The Imperial Navy, also known as the Imperial Armada, was one of the most successful navies in the galaxy, led by one of the most competent officer corps ever seen in the Star Wars universe. They led the 20-year-long war that expanded the Sith Empire's border from a handful of star systems in the Outer Rim to controlling half the galaxy. From the Battle of Korriban to the Battle of Coruscant, the entire time they led the way for the ideals of personal freedom, strength of self, and nationalism across the galaxy. Their standardized line of warships were able to make mincemeat of all competitors. That's why, once again, they are the base for my military with some minor tweaks. The first fatal flaw of the Imperial Navy it isn't distinct enough from the Imperial Army in universe for their conduct, tactics, and ranking structure. According to the fandom website, there are only 13 ranks in the Imperial Navy: Private, Specialist, Corporal, Sergeant, Petty Officer, Ensign, Lieutenant, Commander, Captain, Group Captain, Commodore, Admiral, and Grand Admiral. First off, there are only 13 ranks in. Second, the enlisted ranks are meant for an army, not a naval force. The U.S. Navy, for example, has 20 ranks. As with the Army, I am going to expand the ranking structure to ensure a chain of command. My enlisted ranks would resemble more of a naval style instead of holding Army-style ranks, like within the Star Wars Sith Empire's Imperial Navy. The first would be Shipman, Shipman Recruit, Shipman Apprentice, and Shipman. These are the basic enlisted ranks that make up the majority of men on my warships. Then the more advanced enlisted ranks: Petty Officer 3rd Class, Petty Officer 2nd Class, Petty Officer 1st Class, Chief Petty Officer, Senior Chief Petty Officer, Master Chief Petty Officer, and Fleet Master Chief Petty Officer. The Master Chief Petty Officer, there would only be one per vessel, and the Fleet Master Chief Petty Officer would be aboard the flagship of the flotilla. This ranking system is based off the U.S. Navy's ranking system, representing the largest majority of the members of the greatest navy ever seen on this earth. Next is my officer corps, the managerial class of any branch of the military. My naval officer ranks, instead of having a U.S. naval structure, I am going to base it off the German Kriegsmarine, or the German Navy of the Second World War, as I have noticed that most Imperial Navies in the Star Wars universe have always used German naval structure in rank and design in their Sith Empires. I wonder why, George Lucas. The lower officer, or in naval terms, the line officer, would start with the ensign, lieutenant junior grade, lieutenant, lieutenant commander, commander, and captain. These men manage the ships in the daily tasks along with tactical insight in the battlefield. Then we get to the Admiralty. The first Admiral rank would be the Rear Admiral lower half. These men, or lower grade depending on whichever you prefer, would either be assigned to lead a small flotilla of probably 10 warships max, or managing the logistics of larger fleets. Next is the Rear Admiral upper class. They practically do the same as the lower Rear Admiral, but is the backup to the Vice Admiral. Next is the Vice Admiral. These men command the next fleet tier up from Flotilla, the Task Force, which is 3 to 5 flotillas or 30 to 50 warships. The next following rank would be the Admiral, which would lead fleets or 3 to 5 task forces of anywhere from 90 to 250 warships, depending on the size of the fleet and our task forces. Lastly will be the Grand Admiral, which would be given commands over multiple fleets, grouping together in what is called an armada, which can be ranged from 3 to 10 fleets depending on the campaign note. Note that all my pilots would also be officers from the ranks of an ensign to commander. Once they reach the commander rank and are ready to advance to captain, They'd be sent off to be trained as a flag officer and given command of a warship as captain. The next list on our task is fleet composition and my overall fleet doctrine, where I would follow 3 different doctrines in my Imperial Navy depending on the type of fleet and what their role is. The first is called the Decisive Battle theory. This is the naval doctrine that is one that most think of when it comes to naval warfare. Massive hulking fleets duking it out in the open void of space, or in the open oceans. This kind of warfare is dictated mostly by weight of numbers, which is why only fleets would conduct such battles. The objective of the decisive battle is to make surgical strikes at large enemy fleets and destroy them in a timely manner before they could be reinforced with more warships to avoid large casualties on your side. Most of these battles would be conducted in open space, rarely choosing to battle near a planet. The second doctrine I would follow would be the strategic doctrine, which would involve the taking of worlds from enemy formations. The strategy would be to send a fleet or task force to blitz and destroy the enemy's world's defending fleet, drop marines to establish a beachhead on the planet's surface, and annihilate the enemy fleet before establishing a blockade of the system. They would also escort transports ferrying troops from the surface and providing orbital support of ground forces with bombardments and supplies. The last doctrine would be the trade and supply interdiction doctrine. This tactic was used by the German Kriegsmarine in the Second World War, as they didn't have a large surface fleet to take on the British Royal Navy. So they targeted the convoys bringing foreign supplies to the British Isles with their U-boat or organized into Wolfpacks or Wolfpacks, depending on how you pronounce it. I would only use a special type of fleet. I would call the Wolfpacks. I know, I'm not really creative. My U-boats would be modified Fury-class interceptors, as they are classed more as corvettes, and I would equip them with stealth field generators, essentially a cloaking device, and group them up in fleets of 20 along with a lone interdictor cruiser of some class, to prevent hyperspace jumps away to save their own supplies, led by a lower rear admiral, to strike at the enemy supply lines, destroy or seize enemy shipping in lightning strikes, lasting no longer to a matter of minutes before breaking off. This tactic would have the same effect as on the British, where they had to divert warships to protect their convoys, and that meant less in their fleets from their main forces to deal with, scattering their navy so they would be easy to destroy. But a fleet isn't only tactics and fleets. They need men and women alongside the warships and weaponry, or else they would be completely useless. So let's begin with training. The training for my naval personnel would be separate from the Army, as if they received the same training, the men would think as naval personnel, but as Army personnel. They need distinction. The only thing roughly the same in my eyes would be the basic training regiment. It would follow many of the Army's training, including the doctrine that every man is a rifleman. They would be taught to be sailors, proficient in combat with sharp minds and lean bodies. After the basic training regiment, they would be shipped off to advanced training for their particular occupation, from cook to pilot, helmsman to engineer, where they would receive their training in maintaining and operating the ships that they are assigned to. That's why older warships half the time wouldn't be scrapped, but used for training purposes so the crews could learn how a ship operates before they're assigned to an actual modern warship in my armada, where they would be assigned to their posts until their terms of service or life has expired. Same with the Army. My Imperial Navy will assign you to whichever occupation based upon the standardized military test similar to the American ASVAB test, or Armed Services Aptitude Battery, Vocational Aptitude Battery test. Onto the warships of my Sith Empire, which is practically a copy-paste Sith Imperial Navy from the Star Wars The Old Republic MMORPG. In terms of ships, as it seems like a very standardized fleet that is effective because of their warships, expanding the Sith Empire from a handful of systems in the Tangle Arm to owning over half the galaxy. The first warship in my arsenal would be the infamous Howard-class Dreadnought. As the name implies, it was the main capital ship of the Sith Empire, leading most fleets into battle, turbolasers firings, and ships burning in its wake. The purpose of this warship was to be the Dreadnought, a style battleship that packed a ton of firepower with a minimum crew complement. The crew only numbered a tiny 2,800 personnel and carried over 7,300 other personnel, mostly soldiers and marines. The warship possessed an unspecified number of turbolasers, ion cannons, laser cannons, point defense, laser batteries, proton torpedoes, and concussion missiles. I would keep all these aspects but multiply them by 2 in pure numbers to give them an overwhelming firepower advantage to a relatively small ship compared to other capital ships and spacefaring nations of the Star Wars galaxy. For instance, the Imperial II class Star Destroyer is 1,600 meters long with a nearly 40,000 man crew and soldiers, while the Howard is only 800 meters with the previously saved crew and troop complement of roughly 10,000. Also, for a real-world comparison, one of the greatest produced battleships ever to take to the open seas in our world, the German battleship Bismarck and its class of same name in the Kriegsmarine had a crew complement of 2,000 while being 251 meters in length, making it one of the smallest battleship classes of the war, while being one of the most effective in design, especially compared to the colossal Iowa and Yamato classes. I would heavily upgrade the Howard class for my style of warfare. For one, I would completely change how fighters, bombers, and close air support aircrafts would be launched and stored. For this, I would take inspiration from the show Battlestar Galactica or the Pelican launch tube of the UNSC Infinity from Halo 4, where my starfighters would be put into specially made launching tubes along the edges of the ship to save up space inside the ship for more starfighters that I talk about in my Starfighter Core video. The link will be in the description below if you want to check that out. But simply, I would have my Howard-class Dreadnought carry 200 Star Wars F-35s, 120 A-10 Warthogs, and 30 B-2 bombers, all housed in the tubes along the hull of my vessel, no matter what class, but the number would change. My hangars, meanwhile, will take on the role of housing shuttles and maybe 1 or 2 Fury-class interceptors for the Admiral's or Sith's personal use. My hangars would mostly take on half the role as a flight deck on most aircraft carriers, just a place where they land as well as being placed where they get repairs by maintenance personnel. Beyond these changes, I wouldn't change the design of the Howard-class Dreadnought. I love it. It's very modular, compact, and also very little flaws. Grand Moff Viken knew what he was doing when he designed this ship. The second ship in my fleet, and the most numeral ship of the line of all the designs in this, is the Terminus class destroyer. This warship is the most numeral support ship in the Sith Empire and is designed to take on both warships smaller and much larger than itself, consisting of a small crew of 520 with an additional 285 troops. Same with the fighter systems I would have on the Howards. I would implement into the Terminus equipped it with 30 Star Wars versions of the F-35 and 10 A-10s. The rest of the vessel would stay relatively the same, but I would make a second variant of the Terminus class destroyer and filled with a very vital role in destroying enemy armadas and preventing enemy escape in the Star Wars galaxy, the Interdictor. I would make a model called the Terminus II class Interdictor destroyer. The difference is I would make space in the destroyer to house a single gravity well generator to be attached to a flotilla to ensure the enemy can't flee during combat through hyperspace. The third warship in my fleet would be a variant of the Fury-class interceptor corvette with a stealth field generator put aboard to be used in Wolfpacks to destroy enemy trade and supply lines, through the vadness of space. I would also order the creation of troop transports in infiltrating variants of carry a company worth of soldiers, marines, or special forces behind enemy lines. Finally, the ship in my arsenal, though it isn't a ship of the line, it is the beating heart of the fleet that plays a vital role in the military. This vessel manages the logistics of the Imperial Army, Navy, and Navy. The Gauge-class transport. This ship is pretty much a copy-paste Terminus-class destroyer with more space within the hull saved up to transport troops, equipment, ammunition, fuel, and other supplies. This comes at the expense of their heavy weaponry, like turbo lasers, but still possesses the armor and protective weaponry of the Terminus-class destroyer. I would also attach 10 F-35 fighters for an escort of the transport. These ships would probably be the highest in sheer numbers compared to every other ship on this list, just for their very vital role. Now, the organization of my fleet. As I described before, to reiterate though, let's start with the flotilla. The average flotilla is a max 10 ships, which would consist of 7 Terminus-class destroyers and 3 Howler-class dreadnoughts, led by a rear admiral lower grade and/or upper grade. The tier up is called the task force, which is 3 to 5 flotillas of 30 to 50 ships with the same ratio of warships as the flotilla that is led by a vice admiral. The main organization of the Imperial Navy is the fleet, which is 3 to 5 task forces or 90 to 250 warships led by an admiral. Lastly is the most vague organization, the Armada, which consists of 3 to 10 fleets and is led by a Grand Admiral. Also, there are 2 other fleets, the Convoy Fleet, which is 150 Gauge-class transports, 1 Howler-class dreadnought, and 5 Terminus-class destroyers that are led by a Rear Admiral lower grade that just brings supplies to planets and other fleets. Then the third type of fleet is the Wolfpack, which is a group of 250 Fury-class interceptor corvettes with stealth field generators and a single Terminus-class destroyer with a gravity well generator and stealth field generator led by a Rear Admiral lower grade. But my Navy isn't only ships though, as I decided to include a Marine Corps that I thought about giving these men their own video, but I thought about it and it would just be my Imperial Army 2.0. So let's begin with my Imperial Marine Corps. For centuries, navies have used a form of naval infantry to attack both on land and at sea, from the Romans literally dropping bridges onto other ships to slaughter their crew, to the United States Marine Corps invading Iwo Jima. The Star Wars universe too has had naval infantry, but most of the time they never actually serve in their role. So let's quickly explain the Imperial Marine Corps. My Imperial Marine Corps, unlike the United States Marine Corps, wouldn't be a separate branch of the military. Instead, they are directly a part of the Navy. My Marines would hold naval, not Army ranks, go to naval basic training and serve aboard naval vessels. Their equipment would be the same as the Army, and their only jobs would be combat roles and combat-related roles like infantry, armor, artillery, recon, and other combat roles. The actual Navy would cover logistics, military police, medical, and transportation itself, instead of the Marines and Navy are one and the same. The Marines' role would be only be three true duties: additional ship security from boarding parties, launching boarding party operations, and establishing beachheads on enemy worlds so the Army would deploy and exploit. They are an expeditionary force purely and are not meant for long campaigns. That is for the Imperial Navy to deal with. Imperial Army to deal with. They would possess the same organization like the Army, subdivided into squads, platoons, companies, all the way up to division. I would assign one division to each flotilla, being divided between the ships to act as onboard auxiliary security until deploying as boarding parties or planetside. The task force likewise has 3 to 5 divisions, which would be considered a corps. The fleet would possess 9 to 25 divisions called a Marine Army, which is the largest organization of my Marine Corps. Overall, I would structure my Imperial Navy for flexibility, usability, and functionability, with a German Kriegsmarine and US Navy and Marine Corps aspects all wrapped into a neat bow of the Sith Imperial Navy. But now we have come to the end of the military episodes. Please come and join me next time. I will be getting into the civilization, government, economy, geography, and many more aspects of the world building behind my fictional Sith Empire. Thank you all for watching. Please hit that like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to keep up to date with your favorite Sith Lord, Darth Kilhoun. Have a good day, guys.